How is everyone doing? Strength Chat episode 82, and today I have got a very special guest for you. Today I'm joined by the founder of Performance RX, and he's a lead instructor for the McGill Trainer courses. He's got 20 plus years experience of personal training, with himself being a national champion in karate and bodybuilding. Today I am joined by Proskewitz. How are you doing?
Hey Steve, I'm very well. And thank you very much for having me on your podcast. As I always say, when people reach out to me to pick my brains and get to hear what I've done in the industry, I'm extremely humbled and honored. So I'm very happy to be here, man.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for taking the time to chat with me. Obviously, we've emailed quite a bit to set up the chat. How have you been? What have you been up to?
Geez, what have I been up to? That's a big question, Steve. I do a hell of a lot of things. So my daily life is spent probably about 12, 13 hours a day. I spend at Performance RX, which is my facility in London. Here we specialize in personal training, and we also have got a whole team of experts that look after injury rehabilitation. And as I'm sure you know very well, I work with Professor Stuart McGill. So I spend a huge amount of time looking after people's low backs. Hopefully I'm doing a good job, and we just try and sort of unravel a whole host of complex things that people seem to get involved with, and try to give them a simple solution if we are able to do that. Also, I travel the world and I teach. I teach both for Professor McGill, and I also teach for myself. PRX or Performance RX has got an education component to it, which I've actually never launched publicly, but it's in the process of. But I travel the world, and I teach people how to lift properly and how to train properly, and hopefully create a better environment for both them and their clients to work in.
Yeah. Cool. So have you got any teaching or speaking coming up, or how's the second half of this year sort of looking?
Jeez. Well, I've just got back from a gig in Los Angeles, and I leave next week for New York, and then Miami, and then I'm teaching in South Africa. Wow. And then back again in quite a few other places in the US. And then also I think I've got China on the cards. I've got Brazil on the cards. So there's quite a lot going on, man.
Yeah. Are there a few places that you've not been before? Will you be able to do a little bit of exploring, or are there similar places that you've been to before?
No, a lot of the places I haven't been to. And the thing is I'm literally in and out relatively quickly. So I don't have the luxury of touring around too much. And truth be told, Steve, I'm not the best tourist in the world. I'm the type of guy, I'd rather sit with my host and have a coffee or a good glass of red wine, and rather pick his or her brains with regards to what's going around in the city or in the country. And that's how I do my touristy things, man. But I'm not a stand in line type of guy, and go and look at something and take a picture, and so I rather try and get to feel the cities from the people whom I'm with.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one. Yeah, me and my girlfriend went to Italy, and we were stood in a queue, went and saw something, and I just went, let's just go wander around, let's just go explore a little bit. So yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one there. So obviously you've mentioned there's quite a few job roles that you do there. For anyone listening who might not know who you are, or the work that you do, or how you've got to be in the position that you're in now, obviously working with Professor Stuart McGill and teaching, do you just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself?
Sure, Steve. I'll make it. I'm going to make this as quick as I can, because I'm sure your listeners want to get to the meat and potatoes of what you're going to ask me. But basically, I've been a strength coach for 25 years. As you can hear my accent, I'm originally from South Africa. I got involved in a huge amount of orthopedic rehab back in South Africa in the early days. in those days, there was no restrictions as to whether a physiotherapist or an orthopedic surgeon could refer their patients to. So I had a gym in South Africa with my business partner, and we were hooked up with about 3 or 4 orthopedic surgeons, and they used to refer a lot of their patients to us. Funny enough, mostly for ACL, post-ACL reconstruction training. So for us, it was a little bit of a, get thrown into the deep end straight away. And as a strength coach, I got to learn about the pros and cons of traditional rehabilitative training, how to apply certain strength and conditioning protocols to the rehab or post-operative patient. And it was a fantastic education, probably a better education than any school could ever give you, because we worked many, many hours over a period of about 11, 12 years with both the athletic population and the gen population. Yeah. But it was mostly in the world of rehab. And then 14 years ago, my wife and I decided to leave South Africa, and we landed up in London. And it wasn't very long after me arriving here that I got to meet up personally with Stu McGill. And people always ask me, they say, Joel, how did you get to meet up with Stu, and how did you get to work with him? And long story short, Steve, but I'm just going to put it down to South African tenacity. I wouldn't take no for an answer. So I sort of pushed my way into Stu's life. But one of the reasons I did that was because at that stage I was dealing with what was potentially a career-changing low back injury. I was very, very active. I did a whole bunch of crazy things, and I fractured my spine. And all the clinicians that I'd seen, and in actual fact, the neurosurgeon that I saw in South Africa just before coming here, basically said that I better stop because I'm going to land up in a wheelchair, and I should stop personal training, and I should, get a desk-based job and hang around a computer for the rest of my life, which just didn't go down well with me. Yeah. So I got to meet Stu, and Stu sort of, first time we met, he said, Joel, I've literally got 5 minutes for you. And 5 minutes turned into 3 hours, and 3 hours has turned into 14 years. So, Stu is a huge part of my life. He's just done so much for me, and for me to be part of his teaching team of Backfoot Pro. There's 3 of us. It's Stu, myself, and our colleague Ed Cambridge. I'm extremely humbled, and we just have an absolute blast together. And I've sort of got myself in the world of low backs, and have done so now for 14 years, and that's what I do, man. So that's me.
Cool. So we'll be in safe hands with the questions that I've got lined up. And yeah, having followed some of Stuart McGill's work, and when I emailed him, and he managed to reply, and when you replied as well, it was to have 2 people such as yourself replying, to be able to pick your brains was absolutely awesome. Especially so, we chatted a little bit before we started recording this episode, having hurt my back, and people come in and with movement issues or pains or niggles. No one ever comes in and says, my lower back's really, really healthy, everything's fine. Everyone always says that the lower back is aching or sore. So hopefully, people listening, with the question I've got lined up to pick your brains, will be able to sort of point them in the right direction of what best to do.
Well, we'll absolutely try our best, Steve. 100%.
Good. So obviously, I just mentioned there about niggles and pains, not just in people's lower backs, but just in their joints in general. And what have you found to be the triggers or the reasons behind this? Because sometimes people have these niggles for or these pains for a while. So in terms of sort of joint pain and niggles, what have you found to be the reasons or triggers behind this?
Steve, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to answer the question within the context of the work that I do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to relate it to the low back and the hips and the pelvis, because that's the paradigm now through which I see life. That's all I do now. And generally, people come to me and they fall into certain categories. And the most common category why people come to see me is because they have done something wrong in the gym. Something went wrong. And one of my patients is actually coming to mind, and she's been a sort of an endurance type of athlete most of her life. She's done a lot of aerobic-based classes. She's done a lot of road running, that type of thing. And she's never had any, or never experienced any back pain for most part of her life. It was only when she got into the gym and she started to deadlift really heavy and squat really heavy and do really heavy kettlebell swings that life changed for her. Now, the thing is this, and I don't want your listeners to misinterpret what I'm saying, because I'm an S&C coach. I'm a strength coach. Yeah. I'm all for deadlifting and squatting and kettlebell swinging and doing everything else. But you need to understand how the movement relates to the person doing the movement. So do people understand there's certain anatomical restrictions, maybe in their hips and in their lower back? Do they understand that just getting onto the machine and following the placard of instructions is not the way to go, because you must never fit yourself to the machine. The exercise needs to fit the person. Yeah. So the reason that people come and see me in pain, and the majority of people, is because they've done something in the gym, and your usual offenders are the squat or the deadlift, the kettlebell swing, the 45-degree leg press. Those are the ones that come up all the time when people come to see me. However, Steve, I also get to see a certain demographic that have been involved in traumas. I've seen people falling from pretty scary heights. Their job requires them to use a really high ladder or be on a tree at a particular height. And I've had people fall 7, 8, 9 feet, land flat on their back, land on their sacrum. So I get to see high velocity traumas as well. So essentially, without going into more detail of all the different people that I get to see, those are the two most common.
So obviously you mentioned there about it's by something either going wrong in the gym or a fall or something like that, and just we'll go back to the pains and needles in a moment. But I just want to sort of move into when you mentioned there about people's individual movement, and for talking about the general population, if you like. When people come into the gym, we'll do, or the gym that I work in, we'll do a movement screen. And there's some movements that people just really struggle with, or they get a little bit of stiffness or tightness, or basically the movement doesn't feel really comfortable. Now, sure. Would that be, in terms of movement or lack of movement in those joints, would that be not necessarily something that they've done in the gym if they've not trained very regularly, or would that be caused by sort of sitting at a desk all the time or anything like that? How can that play a role in getting pains and niggles in your lower backs, your hips, or any other joints for that matter?
Steve, so what I'm going to do is, I'll relate it to the people that I get to see. And what generally tends to happen is I think people are forced into the square peg round hole perspective. So they've been told that they need to do a particular movement screen or assessment screen, or they need to stretch certain things, or they need to try and mobilize certain things. But I think the very first thing, and I'm not against any of that, but I think the very first thing that you need to do is, as a trainer, as a coach, you need to understand the anatomical structure that is standing in front of you. Now, I present this at all my presentations. I speak to my clients all the time, my patients. And the thing is, I always start off with two things. I take a look at their hips. I'm very, very interested to understand what type of anatomical hip structure they have. And I can't change their hips, Steve. The shape of their hips is the shape of their hips. I've got people that are able to change their hips, and those are my hip surgeons. So they can go in there and they can shave and they can do a whole host of things and they can remodel a person's hip, right? But the thing is, when that person is standing in front of me and they've said, Joel, you know what, I've been told to do a deep squat and this is what I have to do to activate my glute muscles and a whole host of things like that. And that just doesn't sit with me, Steve, because none of that makes sense on the basis that personal training is exactly that. It's personal. So I need to understand, some people have got extremely long levers. Other people have got short levers. Also, we need to understand what is the cost of doing an exercise, because I may have a very high muscular cost, but the corresponding joint cost may be even higher. And if I don't respect levers, line of force, axis of rotation, a whole host of things that actually most trainers should know about, you should understand the basic physics and the understanding of mechanics and biomechanics. If we don't understand that, then what we do is we just throw out exercises in the hope of actually gaining some type of positive response. And most of the time, that is put to a halt due to someone picking up a joint injury. So I think if you were to press me for a simple answer, why do I believe people get sort of niggles and pains in their joints? Because in the gym, I don't believe their joints and their structure is respected. That's what I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone is an individual. Not everyone's squat stance is going to be the same. It's funny when you were just speaking there. One of the guys that I coach, he's always having sort of like discomfort in his shoulders. His goal is obviously to get stronger, and in his head he's thinking that you just need to do the powerlifting lifts, which it isn't always the case. Not everyone has to deadlift, do a conventional deadlift. Not everyone's going to be able to sink as low. And I changed his bench press to a neutral grip bench press, and then went to a floor press just to sort of look after his shoulders a little bit. He said, well, can I not just go back to normal barbell bench press? And I was like, well, you can, but as a coach, it's my job, not to injure you, not to cause you any pain. This is a little bit more specific. We're still working towards your goals, but I don't want you to have pain in your shoulders and just at the sake of adding a couple of extra kilos on your bench press, because if that does happen, but then you injure yourself, you've then taken a couple of steps backwards to end up nowhere near where your goals have been. So I do agree that when it comes to personal training, you've got to look at the person.
It's very important, man. It's and sorry to interject, Steve, but the thing is, what you've said is just sort of reawakened a thought process that I had actually earlier today with a client. Is that there's three things that I always like to put forward to people. And I always say to them, you need to respect your structure and you need to respect your tipping point. And if you stay under your tipping point, now we're not talking elite athletes, we're just talking gen pop. If you stay under your tipping point, it will naturally increase your availability. And your availability is essentially the ability to be pain-free. And your joints feel good. And then if your availability is increased, then your ability to express what you want to express in the gym will naturally increase. So if you have that sort of little infographic stuck in your head, stay under my tipping point, increase my availability, and bam, there goes my ability. It increases massively. Then generally what happens is, and that's all retro worked from understanding the person who's standing in front of you. And if you can do that, then generally you will have a very long-term business as a trainer or a coach, because the last thing you want to do is ever injure people, because that's what stops your business.
completely agree. You know, I'll when people come in and they'll say, you know, I want to get stronger, I want to do this, or I want to do that. I want them getting stronger and training for, I quite like the phrase training for life. You know, you want to be still healthy and strong, you know, for a long period of time, not just for 12 weeks or however long these programs are. It is training for life, you know, and making sure that every time you are training, it isn't pain or you know or discomfort.
Absolutely, man.
On the note of of pain and niggles, sometimes people aren't always 100% sure of where to go, who to ask, what information to find, and sometimes they just might let that discomfort and just avoid anything that's going to cause any pain or any niggles. So, what are your thoughts on if you know some people, if pain just becomes the norm, if you like, and they just avoid any movements that's gonna cause pain in that area, and what are the sort of what can be the impact of that?
So let's start off to try and understand the different genesis of pain, and I learned this really from Stu McGill. He was really the person that opened my eyes to this. And for example, let's take muscle pain. We go into a gym on a Monday evening. What do? On a Monday, we bench press, or we train chest and some flies and whatever else, right? And then we wake up the next morning and we start to feel a little bit of what we perceive to be stiffness. And then that gradually increases over a period of maybe 24 to 48 hours. It probably peaks around there. And then it starts, and the more trained you are, the quicker it starts to taper off. And then you can go back into the gym and then, you know, retrain that particular body part. Now, that generally is the genesis of a muscular involvement to the pain sensation, right? So we know that it's muscle. So if someone has done something to their back and within 24 or 48 hours later, things have settled down, you most probably have done something from a muscular perspective.
Yes.
Now, the difference is this, is that when someone does something to their back and it lasts longer than 4 or 5 days, and there's possibly an element of amplification of the pain, so it's starting to get worse, the pain then starts to migrate, or it starts to morph a little bit into something else. And what generally happens in the low back is that people start off by having pain in their low back, which may dissipate after 2 or 3 days, but then starts to change into what we term a radiating neural pain down the legs. So they start to get a little bit of a change of sensation, or they turn around and they say, well, I've got some tingling down my legs, or my big toe has gone numb, or I get electrical shocks every time I sit down and I tuck my head down. Then we know that there's something far more involved than just plain old muscular pain.
Yeah.
And it's at that stage that's when a lot of people start to seek out assistance or help, because the minute there's any type of neural involvement or this tingling or electrical activity, for most people, that's a little bit of a scary thing to experience. Yeah. And that's when they get pushed into seeking certain methods or certain experts, etc., etc. So the thing is pain normal? Well, I suppose in my head, because I can only speak for me, I like to categorize things into 2 different categories. I like to understand if things are normal or if things are common.
Okay.
And a lot of time, most people would assume things are normal, when in actual fact, they're not normal, but they are common. In other words, there's been a huge population group that has experienced the same thing that you're experiencing. Now, that doesn't mean it's normal.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is I'll get to hear a lot of clinicians turn around and say, you know what, having bulges in your back is normal. That is not true. I don't agree with that. And that's not the clinical side of me coming out. that's the humanistic logical side saying, well, if it's normal, we'd all be born with bulges in our lumbar spine or in our spine, right? But if we are born with that, the pediatrician or the doctor or the obstetrician stops and turns around and says, we need to investigate something. There's something going on here. Something doesn't look right in this particular kid, right? Yeah. So again, that's where you need to choose your thoughts and choose your words a little bit more carefully and determine, is it normal or is it common?
Yeah.
So the thing is, there's many different types of pain. Do I believe that muscle pain after a heavy body part session is normal? No, it's common, because to have trauma to your muscle to that degree can't be normal, but it's common. Doesn't mean it's bad.
Yeah. I've never really thought about it like that. I think that's a good way of looking at it, because, you know, you'll see people coming in and exactly like you say, you might have a large population that have felt this, but, you know, normal would be, because everyone, just on a little bit of a tangent there, people always ask what normal is, what is normal, what's the standard, and how you put it there, you know, if it is normal, everyone would have it. That's sort of made me think a little bit differently about that then. Just on that topic there as well, and, you know, when the pain starts to radiate, if you like, have you found that sometimes, so for example, what I was thinking was, when I hurt my back in December, I started getting a pain in my glutes. So I was a little bit like what you do for like the sciatic nerve, getting a trigger ball into your glutes. Have you found that sometimes you can find a misdiagnosis and people think it's actually sciatica, or is that a symptom of, or one of the tests that you would do if you've hurt your lower back?
Well, when people come to me, Steve, I never make any assumptions. And the longer I do low backs, the less assumptions I make.
Okay.
Right? And I will let the person tell me their whole story, because I want to determine what's going on. I want their history to give me information. So now I keep my mouth very quiet and I just let them talk, and they tell me everything they want to tell me. And I get to hear this all the time. Joel, my previous guy that I saw, told me I've got piriformis syndrome. Now, just for your listeners, if they don't know what that is, the piriformis is a muscle that lies pretty deep in the glutes, and it assists with certain rotation movements of the hip. And the sciatic nerve runs through the piriformis, and that the sciatic nerve originates through certain levels at the low back, and they all join, and then together they join these exiting nerve roots to create the sciatic nerve roots, which run down the whole gamut of the back of your leg. They get to about the knee, and then they branch out into other little branches, but that's the sciatic nerve. So people come and see me and say, I've got this pain in my glute and whatever else, and I've been rolling with the ball, I've been stretching my hamstring, I've been stretching my glutes. My question to them is, well, how do you feel? And they'll turn around and say, well, I actually feel really good for about 10 or 15 minutes post-rolling. But in actual fact, if I think about it on an overall graph, I'm getting worse. Then it's not piriformis syndrome, because if, as I'm sure maybe Stu mentioned this in his interview with you, but if you really, really want to understand piriformis syndrome, you need to possibly look at even at some radiological images to see, right, if the sciatic nerve has actually penetrated the piriformis itself, right? And so then you need to delve a hell of a lot deeper than just making an assumption, oh, it's definitely piriformis syndrome. Yeah. But the thing is this, people also assume that sciatica, right, is just felt down the back of the legs. Well, the thing is, you've got exiting nerve roots as well that innervate certain areas of your skin. So for example, if you're feeling the outer portion of your lower calf, that is L5. That area of the calf is actually innervated by the L5 nerve root. So the thing is that sciatica is a term that's loosely thrown around to try and describe this weird sensation that people experience down their legs. But we also know through research, Steve, that at the back of the spine, I'm glad I'm on video because I can show you my little dynamic disc model here.
Anyone on Spotify and iTunes, you're going to have to go to YouTube now.
So if you take a look, now this is an exact replica of an L4 and an L5 vertebral bodies with an intervertebral disc, commonly known as L4 and L5. Now, if you take a look at the back, so I'm showing you the back of the person, you've got little joints on either side of the spine called the facet joints, or as I like to say in the US, it's the facet joints. And what facet joints do is they allow for segmental motion in a sagittal plane, right, of the spinal segments. Now, facet joint involvement of low back pain can also replicate radiating pain that goes down your legs. And again, most people can assume that's coming from the sciatic nerve root, when in actual fact, it's coming from a bony involvement of the facet joints themselves. And the sciatic nerve may be completely uninvolved.
Yeah.
So again, you've got to be, or at least people need to be precise in determining what's going on so that their prescription of exercises or of movement avoidance or whatever it is, whatever they want to do or what they choose to do, what their clinical abilities give them to do, is a little bit more justified and verified. And on that basis, if I can just say something about what I do, people come and see me because of my association with Stu McGill, and because of the publicized media attention, the 3 exercises called the McGill Big 3, they come and see me because they think the McGill Big 3 get you out of pain. They don't. And what they realize is after we've done an assessment, we need to determine what's causing the pain first, and hopefully, not every time, but most of the time, I can generally, come to a relatively precise diagnosis, and it's through that. Then we determine what needs to be removed, modified, changed, added, and then we can look to add the McGill Big 3 as an initial entry to get people moving again, because I'm very pro-movement.
Yeah.
But in a different way. In other words, a little bit more cerebral involvement in their movement patterns, okay, to upskill their movement proficiency. Yeah. That's what we do.
Yeah. When you mentioned there, what I've taken from that is people have mentioned the McGill Big 3, and they'll say, "Oh, I'll do the McGill Big 3. Why is my back still hurting?" And in the episode before this, I spoke with Brian Carroll.
Right. Okay.
He said the exact same thing. It's not a case of, yes, there are the 3 big exercises. They're the most common ones, if you like, that people have heard of, because you'll see them. You see them all over. They are more commonly known to people. But exactly what you said, it's going a little bit more in depth and looking at the person, listening to what they're saying. And why I mentioned about I didn't write anything down for this as a little bit of a tangent about the sciatica and foam rolling the glutes and that sort of stuff, is that sometimes I find that people will. I've had clients before that have gone to maybe 3 or 4 different physios or therapists, and they keep having to going back, and I'm keeping foam rolling, and obviously, it's a little bit like it's a little bit like flogging a dead horse. You've got to, at some point, it's like, right, this isn't working. let's have a look a little bit deeper. Let's see what we can change a little bit. So yeah, I'm quite glad that you went into that sort of. There is more to it than what. If it doesn't go away, there's something else that you might need to have a look at, which is exactly why I wanted to pick your brains about it.
Steve, if I could just do a little addition for your listeners.
Yeah.
So I go, one of my favorite pastimes, I know, call me crazy, but that's what I do, is I'm associated with quite a few orthopedic and neurosurgeons in the London area. And I get invited literally every 2 weeks to go and observe another surgery. And the surgical specialities that I've decided to involve myself in are hips and lumbar spine, obviously, because of the work that I do. Yeah. So I've seen pretty much nearly every lumbar spinal surgery that you can think of, and I've seen a whole host of hip stuff. And a few months back, I was invited to a hip surgery. And in actual fact, this is a highly, highly specialized technique. But the patient, who was a relatively young male, was having his hip labrum. So that's basically some cartilage, soft tissue stuff in the hip. He was having a labrum transplant, right? Okay. So because the condition of his labrum was beyond repair. Yeah. And he was too young for them to actually do a hip replacement or anything to that degree. So the surgeon, when I got into surgery and I got all scrubbed up, the surgeon pulls out a piece of white-looking thing and holds it in front of me. And it's a piece of it literally looked like a piece of paper. That's what it looked like. So it looked like a really fine cut piece of paper, maybe, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch thick or wide, and very, 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 very thin, and probably about 3 inches long, somewhere around there. And he said to me, he said, "Joel, do you know what this is?" And I said to him, I said, "Well, Prof, obviously you're going to use that to repair the labrum or transplant the labrum." But I said, "I've got no idea what that is." He goes, "This is an iliotibial band from a cadaver, right? So from a dead person." And I looked at that, and it hit me straight away that all these people are rolling their RT bands, all right, in the assumption that it's going to do something. It's going to do nothing, because you can roll and you can roll and you can roll, but that RT band is a piece of ligament structure that literally holds your pelvis to your knee. And if the human body was as simple as rolling something and it released it, the leg would fall apart. So it just, again, people have these things in their head. But what it does do, Steve, is when you roll your piriformis or your glute or your the outer portion of your quadricep, not your RT band, what it does do is it does induce a certain response in the human body, which is, as Stu has put it, is quite analgesic in its effect. So it makes you feel good for a certain period of time, but it doesn't do what you think it's going to do. Release something or take away your sciatic pain if it is true sciatic issues. Yeah. So again, we need to, as coaches, we need to be more precise in our thoughts and more precise about what we say. And if you don't know something, just tell your clients, "I don't know, but I'll go research and I'll find out what the truth is." Yeah,
absolutely. And, that's why like we chatted before we started recording the podcast. That's the whole point of the podcast. And it's funny that you mentioned about the IT band and foam rolling. I actually wrote an article, like a little blog on this maybe a month ago, and it actually got quite a good response. And a few people have commented saying, "Oh, well, I've been foam rolling my IT band, and I foam roll, but then I need to foam roll again." And the article wasn't to just say that people are doing it wrong. Just be like, look, if it feels good, that's absolutely fine. But I try and write blogs that I see people doing to try and give them a little bit more information. And you do see people spending hours and hours foam rolling, and yeah, it's if it feels good, do it. I mean, I foam roll on my recovery and mobility days. I foam roll, and it's absolutely fine. But I also work on movement as well. You know, is because actually, funnily enough, even today, I had a guy come in and he said, "Oh, so some of my foam rolling, I'm thinking about doing a little bit more foam rolling and foam rolling my IT band." I just went, "No," I said, "Just don't do it." Yeah, so I'm quite glad you mentioned about that, because it just goes to show that what I did write in that blog wasn't too far wrong.
Good, man.
So just sort of moving back to sort of the movement side of things, and being a little bit more specific about the hips and the lower back. Some of the foundational movements, if you like, you know, the squat, push, pull. One of the movements that I've found people struggle with quite a lot, and it's quite on topic, because there's a few clients that have come in that really struggle with hip hinging. Why is that movement? Why do people find that movement quite a struggle?
Steve, what I'm going to say, I say with absolutely no offense to any coach out there who's battling to get their clients to do this.
Yeah.
But, because I've been there, so I'm pointing the finger at myself. So no offense intended. But I would go so far as to say it's not the client's fault, but maybe the coach doesn't understand how to strip the movement back and give the client a very digestible portion of the movement. So the big thing that I get to see, because when I travel the world, I make sure that I usually will join up at like one of these commercial gyms when I'm traveling the world, and I'll go and just do my own workout, but I'll watch what people are doing. So I watch what other trainers are doing, and I watch what the general public are doing. And what I believe is this, is that a lot of people come into the gym and it's not their territory. It's not their environment, which is very conducive to their learning unless they're taught properly.
Yeah.
And then the disparity comes in is that a lot of trainers have got into the game of training because they train really well themselves, but they're not teachers.
Yeah.
So when you've got someone who's in an environment that is not conducive to their own learning, and you've got someone who's not inherently a teacher trying to teach this particular task, you just don't get the synergy, you don't get the marriage. So the thing is this, man, is that I always say this in all of my lectures when I'm with Stu and Ed Cambridge. I always say, you know, I do the simple things because I'm nowhere as smart as Stu, right? So the way that I look at things is I look at it in very simple bite-sized pieces.
Yeah.
So if I take a hip hinge, what I want to do is I want to take someone and I want to actually be very tactile with them. And I want to explain to them what the difference between a hip hinge is and a spinal hinge, because most people have no idea where their hips are.
Yeah. So
what happens is when a lot of coaches coach them, they say, well, you know, when you're standing up straight, just give your hips a karate chop. Well, you're not actually karate chopping your hips, right? You're karate chopping your pelvis, right? So you're on the wrong anatomical structure because you're hitting the top of your pelvis. It's not your hips, man. Your hips are lateral. They're slightly posterior. So again, when you break things down and you teach people the difference between movements and just give them a little bit to digest at a time, that seems, well, at least in the context of Performance RX, that works for us. Because none of my trainers, and trust me, we got people who come in here that literally don't know their left from their right with regards to training. And my trainers are successful in imparting movement proficiency tools to virtually every person who walks through these doors. Because we don't rush, we slow things down, we take our time, and we're very tactile in our approach.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned about the karate chop. I'll hold my hand up. I've used that one. I've used that one before. And one of the when you mentioned about sort of taking your time and working through, a guy came in again, never been to the gym. He'd never been in the gym, and he came in. He signed up for the small group training, and some movements. Basically, every movement took a while to work on. It was just a step-by-step approach, and the main one was the hip hinge. It was a big challenge for me. I just couldn't understand why he couldn't do that movement. We looked at his work. I said, let's walk around, that sort of stuff. And I tried to work it back as much as I can. And it actually, one of his first programs was just a kneeling hip hinge. I thought I'll just take a joint out, and then we gradually just progressed it from there. Now his hip hinge, you can do a hip hinge absolutely fine. He can do it loaded, and it's great to see his progression. But his starting point was the only way I found to be able to get him to feel what the hip hinge was in a kneeling position. Sticking your hips back and then pushing yourself back up. What have you found to be the most successful methods that you have used, and what you use at Performance RX?
Most of the time, Steve, I use a dowel stick. So what I will do is I'll put a dowel stick on someone's back, and I'll say to them, standing up, and I'll say to them, I now want you to round your back. Okay, I want you to flex your spine, and I want you to feel how the dowel stick comes off the very bottom of your spine. So where your sort of, where your lumbosacral junction is. Now what I want you to do is I want you to bend your knees ever so slightly and just drive your hips back, and I want you to feel how the stick stays on certain points on your spine. And it's never failed me. Now, a lot of people say, I don't use a dowel stick and don't do this, and they write articles on the whole thing, and I'm thinking, really? Well, in our world, the way that we speak to clients, the way that we instruct them, the way that we are tactile in our involvement in instruction and coaching, it's worked for us every single time. There's never been an instance, Steve, with myself or any of my trainers where that particular setup has failed us.
Yeah. So
works for us, man.
Yeah, absolutely. That is one of the things that I'm quite glad you mentioned that, because that's one of the practices that that we use as well. With the guy that we used there, using the dowel, it actually made him think about it a little bit more. So I thought, right, what would be a regression from that, if you like, being in a kneeling position. But we use the dowel as well, because I think sometimes a lot of people, when you do mention using a dowel for a hip hinge, that because I've seen articles like that saying don't use the dowel, but actually, it can have really great benefit.
But my question is why? Now, the thing is this, Steve. Also, we've determined who we're using it with. Mm-hmm. Now, if I have a person come in who's got some type of shoulder issue, they've got a neck issue, right? Am I going to force them into a certain position if they can't do that? Of course, I'm not going to do that. Yeah. Right? So we got many ways to skin a cat, Steve. Yeah. I'm not beholden to anything. I will use whatever thing I need to use to extract a positive outcome.
Yeah.
Right? So when I say I use a dowel, what I said earlier is that I use it most of the time. Certain people that don't have the ability, right, to flex the shoulder and get their arm behind their head, well, we're going to use a completely different strategy. And again, so when people are very definitive about something, that's when red flags start to jump out at me, man. That's when I'm like, hey, hold on a second. You don't use a dowel, and then they go off to write a whole article about why they don't use the dowel. I'm like, well, hold on a second, that's not right.
Yeah.
It's like what people believe from Stu's work and what we do at Backfoot Pro is that we never want you to flex the spine. Well, it's not what we've ever said. Stu has never, ever once turned around and said, do not flex your spine. He's turned around and he said, right, if you cannot flex your spine pain-free, we now need to look at potential modifications for a particular period of time, and then we'll move you on. But that's those myths are spread by people that have never come to our courses, have never seen what we do. It's the same thing with a Dell. When you're so definitive in something, that's warning signs for me, man. Yeah,
I agree. I think sometimes some coaches can be, this is how I do it. I'm not going to look at anything else. And we chatted a little bit before this podcast, but when interns come into the gym, I just say be open-minded, ask questions, ask why. If you think there's a better way of doing it, let's give it a go. Let's see if that's better. And I like to think of it as there's a thing at the minute, or a trend at the minute, that it's sort of the coach's toolbox, if you like. Seems to be what a lot of coaches are mentioning, and there's certain tools that get the job done, and then there's other tools that you don't need. You don't need for that job. You've mentioned it a couple of times throughout the questions that I've asked, is being a little bit more precise, a little bit more accurate in what you're doing, rather than using something that, if you just use the hammer for everything, you might get some jobs done, but for some jobs, you might just cause a mess. You might cause more harm than good. I'm quite reaffirmed to me that I'm not doing too wrong with the hip hinge, which is good.
Good man.
Just moving on to sort of similarly in line to the hip hinge, but obviously you've mentioned about working with back pain and trying to reduce it, trying to reduce back pain. And one thing, obviously you touched on the McGill Big Three as well, is core stability. So do you just want to, or could you just go into a little bit more detail about what core stability is, and why people sometimes misunderstand that just having core stability alone isn't going to reduce back pain, that there's maybe a little bit more to it?
Sure, no problem. To understand what core stability is, you need to understand what instability is. So let's start off by doing the opposite. What is instability in relation to the lumbar spine? Because I can't speak about it anywhere else in the body for now.
Yeah.
So instability in the lumbar spine, and Stu has researched this. So we've got evidence, documented evidence and research papers to show this. But essentially is when there is tissue damage that creates an element of laxity. So if instability is a result of damaged tissue or the laxity of damaged tissue, then essentially stability is intra-joint integrity of that particular area.
Yeah.
Right? So once you understand instability and stability, then you will get to realize that when someone goes to see a doctor and the doctor turns around and says, you got back pain, you just need to do core stability, right? What hasn't happened is there's never been an assessment to determine if core stability training, and that's a whole nother subject because most people, again, don't know what that is.
Yeah.
But core stability training, if that is the correct intervention for that particular person's pain presentation. Now, to give an example, you're from the powerlifting world. Powerlifters always present to me with a very particular type of pain presentation. It's usually increased on compression and on flexion.
Yeah.
And when you dig deeper and you look at MR images and you do all your assessments and everything that I do, we find out that they've got two main mechanisms or tissue involvement in their pain presentation. Number one is discogenic. So it's the actual disc itself, right?
Yeah.
And then number two, it's the involved end plate, which is a particular type of bone structure, which is different to the outer structure of the vertebra.
Yeah.
And they usually tend to crack, or they create some type of damage on the end plate. And what can happen is you can start to get what they call an intravertebral disc herniation. So not where the disc actually herniates outwards, so sort of front or back, but actually up into the bone.
Okay.
And when you get an intravertebral disc herniation, you actually create joint laxity, because a disc is ligament.
Yeah. So
the function of a disc is to hold bone to bone. That's why people don't slip discs. They don't go anywhere, right? You can tear and you can do a whole host of things. So if it's a ligament, and that ligament has a particular amount of hydraulic properties due to the liquid inside of it, and you now have lost that intra-joint integrity of that particular segment, then you have joint instability.
Yeah.
Now, I'm hoping your listeners now understand, when they've been told they've got joint instability by someone that knows what joint instability is, they now know that the spine's not falling off and falling apart, right? What is actually happening is the most minuscule of movement, just like that, an indication of pain. So what is core stability if we now understand what instability is? Well, plain and simple. Core stability for a person who presents with an element of instability or joint instability is the ability to create more integrity in that joint to arrest any type of micro movements that could be amplifying their pain triggers.
Yeah.
Is core stability training in its purest form for everybody? Well, yes and no. Yes, because it's a great way of training certain movement engrams. But if someone has got major pain presentation on an increase of intra-abdominal pressure, then core stability may not be the best route to take.
Yeah.
So when core stability is given out as just the umbrella prescription for everyone that's got back pain, then I know that person that said that has got no idea about the intricacies of the mechanics of the low back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does it help?
Yeah. It seems to be a thing of people will come in and they'll say, I just need to get a stronger core. I just need to get a stronger core, and that's gonna help with my back. When people have ever said that to you, obviously, you know, there is more to it. What more would you add to it, to the elements to reduce back pain? And where do people go wrong? Because sometimes, yes, they'll do training to strengthen their core and stabilize. Where can sometimes people go wrong when it comes to core training, if you like? And what other pieces to the puzzle do you need?
Well, there's two questions there, so let me answer the first one. Everyone comes in to see me and says, Joel, I've been told I need to get a stronger core. All right. It's very, very, very rare, Steve, that I get to see people who require, now let's use the precision of terminology. It's very rare I get to see people who require more strength. I've had people walk into this office that, let me tell you something, there's absolutely no denying that these guys are absolute powerhouses. They are. I've seen some of the strongest people in the United Kingdom, right, that have walked into my office. These guys have pulled aeroplanes, they've pulled planes, trains, automobiles, the whole damn thing, right? I'm sure as hell not going to turn around to them and tell them that they're weak.
Yeah.
Okay? They're not weak. However, what they don't have, and what the missing link may be, is that they don't have an optimal level of localized muscular endurance that allows them to maintain intra-joint integrity for an extended period of time while they are becoming fatigued.
Yeah.
Is that ringing true?
Yeah, if it's when you're mentioning there about sort of endurance, when they are doing things, they need that that length of time to be able to keep doing what they're doing, because they will be able to. They will be able to. We will be strong to be able to do the movement. So when you mentioned there about
let me explain it again in simple English. Right, strength is very rarely required from the people who come to see me. However, their ability to hold or sustain certain positions to allow that intra-joint integrity to take place while they do their thing and they fatigue, because fatigue plays a very strong role in injurious mechanisms that come to see me, right? I always got hurt on my last rep, or it was the last thing I was doing in the gym, or, it was my fourth exercise, not my first. Well, you were tired, you were fatigued. There was a whole host of things that played. So the thing is that it's very rare that people need to get stronger when they come and see me. They're losing out on endurance, Steve, and that's the big thing. I've had guys that literally can pull planes, trains, and everything else, but they cannot hold a side bridge. Literally, they cannot hold a side bridge for 10 seconds. Now, come on. There's something amiss there, and that's just the logical side thinking that if you can pull an aeroplane, but you can't hold a side bridge for 10 seconds, and looks like you're in just come out of a swimming pool because you're sweating so much. There's something not right in your programming and in your thought process, which then leads me to the next question: what is core stability? Well, okay, everyone's definition of core stability is different. Some people will tell you it's Pilates and doing curl-ups and doing a whole host of things. But if we go back to the scientific evidence of what instability and stability is, then intra-joint integrity, if that is stability, then basically means creating movement processes or software that teaches you how to take a very flexible rod, which is your spine, right, and stiffen it, create integrity in the joints to be able to bear load and then move at the extremities. So proximal stiffness for distal athleticism. Now, again, you go into Instagram and all these things, and people take what Stu and I say completely out of context. I'm talking with the back pain patient that requires an element of core stability training to reduce the initial pain and mechanisms that are causing this deterioration, right? And then we can look at what they do later on down the line as something completely different. Rehab is not the same as performance. They're two very, very different things, right? So we're speaking now about back pain patients and core stability and how it's given out to people. So, and that's where people come in and say, Joel, I've been doing core stability training for a whole host of years, and I'm getting worse. And then you ask them what they're doing, and they say, well, I'm doing curl-ups and I'm doing a whole host of things and Pilates and everything else. But again, that doesn't make logical sense, because if stability means no motion or stable, why then would you do something that creates mobility intra-joint wise and then assume that that's core stability?
Yeah.
It doesn't gel.
After listening, everything that you've, again, like I said before, everything that you've mentioned has been a little bit more precise and thinking about it a little bit more logical. And, when you're seeing there about these big, strong guys that they obviously have the strength there. But one thing that I'll say to the powerlifters, to the people that people training for strength that I work with, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And if you are, like what you mentioned, absolutely sweating and struggling to hold these positions or do these exercises, something doesn't add up there. And how you explained it, I'm quite glad that you mentioned about that, because like we've touched on in other bits of this podcast, is you've got to look a little bit more in depth. Don't just do something and have a short-term result and then keep doing it, but nothing ever gets better. yeah, I think I agree with what you're saying, and it's definitely made me think a little bit more about what I would point people in the direction of doing, and that's 100% why I wanted to have you on to pick your brains. So yeah, thanks, Joel, for taking the time to chat. Yeah, I always feel sometimes for some of these podcasts I should be making notes, and rather than I sometimes forget that. I am actually hosting a podcast. I'm not just doing, I'm not on a selfish note, not just doing this to make me own notes. Loads of topics covered there. I hope everyone found that as interesting as I did. To finish off, what would be, out of all the topics we've covered today, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdoms, Joel?
My take-home points, Steve, for people who are in back pain, don't assume by having back pain that it's the end of the road for you. There's always a solution. Your spine's not falling apart and things aren't, unless there's red flags there, right? And you'll know the human body has got the human body is a phenomenal invention, right? Whoever created it, created the most optimal piece of machinery on this planet. So beside any red flags, if you're in back pain, always know that there's a solution. But the solution can only be sought once you fully understand what the problem is. And Steve, too many people now, very, very smart clinicians, unfortunately, are being too casual in what they're saying. Doesn't matter, just move, or just do this, or just do that. Everything matters.
Yeah.
And that's what that's what you have to keep in mind. Every single thing matters. And if you have the precision of understanding what's going on, then you should hopefully have the precision to find that solution. Right? So keep that in mind. For the coaches out there, the coaches that are listening, right? Think more and speak less. Just when someone says something, don't automatically think that you need to give a response. Let it just swirl around in your head a little bit and really think logically, right? Because many, many methods in this industry that we all love so much, the health and fitness industry and whatever, many methods are are non-verified. People can open a course, a certification, and if they've got a good marketing team behind them, they can say anything they want to say. But the onus is on the coach to think critically about what they absorb and what they use and what they say to their clients. So slow down, think more, speak less. Words of wisdom. I don't know, was that wise? I have no idea, Steve. I just do what I got to do, man.
Two great points as a lifter, as a power lifter. 100%. It does. Things do matter. Everything is a piece of a puzzle. And from a coach's point of view, 100%. I know, thinking about that, some of the first clients that I started working with, I wanted to speak and tell them all about why we were doing this, what we're doing. But actually, probably, as I've sort of, or I like to think I've progressed, just saying exactly what you said. Just the key thing for me is just listening to what people will say, and from what they say, sometimes you can actually find what it is. What the issue is. A little bit like last week, someone came in. My back's a little bit sore. Oh, what's been happening? Oh, I've just been at work all day. Just sat down. Oh, right, okay. So what else it would be? I've been moving house. Right. So carrying all your sofas and furniture and all that sort of stuff, that might have a little bit of a plan of it. So let's change the training session today. Let's work around it a little bit. So yeah, completely agree. Listening a little bit more rather than wanting to speak all the time is good. for everyone listening then who either would like to dig a little bit deeper into the topics that we covered today, and look at the work and the content that you put out there, or, you know, for anyone listening that might be in the London area to come and actually, you know, come and see you, where can people find you and the information that you put out there?
Plain and simple. If you get onto performancerx.co.uk, that's my company's website. You'll get on there. You'll get to see the gym. For trainers and coaches, we're in the process of developing the website. So there'll be 2 portals. There'll be one for clients, and then there'll be one for education for trainers.
Okay.
So that's where I'm going to be releasing all my courses and everything to that degree as well. But for back pain stuff, you can either find me at Performance RX, or you can find me at backfitpro.com. That's Dr. McGill's company. And I'm on there as both an instructor for BackFit Pro and a clinician as well. And for people who are on social media, my Instagram is Joel Perform, so that's JOELPERFORM_RX. So you can find me at Instagram. I'm mostly, that's my source of social media, albeit quite rare that I'm putting a whole bunch of stuff up there. I'm too busy in the real world looking after people. But Steve, that's where people can find me. And, you know, in today's world of technology, no one can hide for too long.
Absolutely awesome. For everyone listening, 100%, you know, check out the work that Joel does. I found this topic really, really interesting. Really found it interesting speaking to you and picking your brains. Thanks a lot for taking the time to chat with me. Thanks a lot to everybody listening, and I will see you all next week.